Well, John, thank you very much for that introduction, and it's indeed a pleasure to be here with you this morning. I couldn't help but think, as John was going through my history of the various jobs that I've held and positions I've held, that those of you who I've never had the honor of meeting before might wonder, can't this guy keep a job? But it is great to be here among real lawyers. People who work day in and day out in the courtrooms of this great nation, representing clients in the great tradition of the American legal profession. As I was thinking about coming here this morning as well, I was thinking about what I might say. I was reminded, thinking about my former life as a member of the Texas Supreme Court, about the definition of an appellate judge. You all have probably heard this. An appellate judge is a person who hides in the hills while the battle rages below, and after it's over, comes down to kill the wounded. Well, as a former appellate judge and a current United States Senator, as I say, it's good to be here with you today. I'd like to especially thank my friend and former colleague, John Martin. When John asked me if I would speak today, I indicated that this was a kind of an awkward time because this is a recess period, at least for the Senate. Congressman Conyers, I think the House is working this week here in Washington. The Senate is in recess, and we're working back in our respective states. So I asked John, I said, well, let me get this straight. You want me to cut short a week in Texas and come back to Washington, back to the belly of the beast? And I said, of course, yes, which is I would only say for a true friend. But in all seriousness, I'm honored to be here today to talk to you about matters that do concern me, a recovering lawyer and judge, about the legal profession, and particularly about the health of our federal judiciary. And specifically, I want to talk to you briefly about compensation for federal judges, as well as the confirmation process itself. As a former judge myself, I applaud DRI's excellent work through its Judicial Task Force. The report published this year by the DRI's task force, titled Without Fear or Favor, is an important contribution to this discussion, and I commend it to each of you if you haven't had a chance to read it yet. I've had a chance to be an active participant in the judicial confirmation process, including the recent confirmation of two of our newest Supreme Court justices, Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Sam Alito. And I have some reflections on that. But first I want to talk to you about judicial pay. As it turns out, I happen to be the father of a second-year law student attending the University of Texas Law School. And I must confess that when she told me what the starting salary was at for top-tier students, my reaction is probably the same as yours when you have to contemplate writing that check as an employer of young lawyers and having to recruit the best and brightest to come to work for your law firm. Can you imagine, though, the reaction of a federal judge who each fall watches his 20-something-year-old law clerks exit his chambers a year after a year of service on the way to earning, as a first-year associate, probably more money than they earn as a member of the federal judiciary. And unlike the judge's salary, the former law clerk projects to make significantly more money than as he or she advances within the ranks of their new firm. Here's what Justice Anthony Kennedy said recently about the subject when he testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee. He said, "Judges do not expect to become wealthy when they're appointed to the federal bench. They do expect, however, that Congress will protect the integrity of their position and provide a salary commensurate with the duties the office requires. For the judiciary to maintain its high level of expertise and qualifications, Congress needs to restore judicial pay to its historic position vis-a-vis average wages and wages of the professional and academic community." I think Justice Kennedy makes some fair points. Of course, as I can attest, no one gets rich, legally anyway, in public service, nor should they. There are, after all, other ways than money that we get paid for what each of us do in terms of our enjoyment, sense of service, and gratification other than in compensation. That having been said, it's vitally important that the federal judiciary continue to draw from the very best of lawyers within the private bar. But the numbers show, unfortunately, an opposite trend. Today, fewer than 4 out of 10 appointments to the federal district bench are lawyers entering from private practice, 4 out of 10. That percentage is at its lowest in over a half century. One important way that the Anglo-American tradition, legal tradition, distinguishes itself from other systems is that we have historically drawn from the judges from the private bar, from the highest ranks, the most experienced and most talented members of the bar. Many other nations, of course, have a judicial civil service, which means that newly minted lawyers advance directly into their careers as judges, as civil servants. As Justice Kennedy points out, our tradition has been to rely upon a judiciary with substantial experience and demonstrated excellence. Private litigants depend on our judges to process complex legal matters with skill, insight, and efficiency that comes only after years of experience at the highest levels of the profession. As you can imagine, this is not only an impediment to recruitment, it also is a problem of retention. Notwithstanding life tenure, we should all be concerned about the number of federal judges who are leaving the bench for other opportunities. The reality is that occasionally we expect that we'll lose talented judges back to the private sector. But I think you would all agree with me that our hope is that it would be rare, that they would continue to gain experience from their years on the bench and continue to be productive throughout their term as a federal judge. In our constitutional system, we confer upon federal judges life tenure to protect their independence. But there's a reciprocal obligation, I believe, that we have. We should not let sagging judicial compensation threaten the ability or the willingness of our federal judiciary to serve their entire term of office. This is a serious problem that Congress must address and fix. And I hope that in the coming weeks that the House and Senate Judiciary Committees will take up bipartisan bills to address the judicial salary problem. As an organization, DRI has voiced its support for raising judicial salaries, and for that I'm appreciative. But in your individual capacities as leading members of the legal community in your town and in your communities, as well as through the bar generally, I hope you'll continue to take seriously your responsibility to help educate the public on the importance of a well-qualified, independent judiciary, and obviously one that we can not only recruit from the highest ranks of the private bar, but also retain throughout their legal career. Let me talk to you a little bit now about judicial confirmation process, and as I said, I've had the chance now to participate in 2 Supreme Court confirmation hearings, but also a number of others for the circuit court and federal district courts. And let me just put it to you straight. I worry that the increasingly partisan and divisive battles over federal judicial nominations will discourage well-qualified men and women from seeking federal judicial office. This, combined with the other topic I just mentioned, flagging compensation, I believe is a genuine threat. Back in 2003, not long after I began to serve in the Senate, I penned an article on this subject in the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy. And it didn't take much time for me to reach this conclusion as I wrote that the judicial confirmation process is badly broken and called then for a fresh start. Today, as I